Hallo Deutschland, ich bin Arejay. Okay, that's all the German I know. This is Arejay from the band Halestorm, and you're watching Drums Bonedo. Dankeschön. Well, my parents took us to a lot of concerts, and when I would watch a band, I would always watch the drummer. I don't know why. It just looked like the most fun. Like, they looked like they're having a blast back there, throwing their sticks. We saw a band at a festival that did a drum set that went upside down, kind of like, they kind of, copied Tommy Lee on it, but it was like some other unknown band, but, well, relatively unknown band. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I want one of those someday. So I started kind of, I think my parents saw that I was interested in it, so they got me a drum set for Christmas one year, and then that kind of got me. Actually, the first drum kit that I ever played on was a set that my parents got at like a toy store for my sister one year, and I would always sneak in her room and play it, and thinking like no one's gonna find me. Little to my 2-year-old brain that everyone could hear it. So after like the 5th or 6th time catching me, beating the shit out of her drum set, she was like, "All right, let's just give it to him," So, and then years later, they got me a drum set, and I don't know, I was just hooked. Meanwhile, my dad was a bass player back in the 70s. He was in a lot of bands until he got drafted into the Army, and he kind of had to give up his music dreams. But then when he saw us kind of growing up and budding into musicians, like showing interest in playing music, he was really excited. He was like, I get to kind of live vicariously through my kids now, And actually, we recruited him to play bass for us in the very beginning. We were like, Dad, get your bass out of the attic. We need somebody to help fill in the sound, and you're gonna jam with us. And so that was kind of how we started. It was me, my sister. I was 10, she was 13, and my dad. So. So it's funny because growing up, we were at a festival and we saw this band called the Newsboys, which were actually a contemporary Christian band. We kind of started out in that world, and now we're out. That's a whole different story. But they pretty much copied Tommy Lee. But that was what we saw. So our spinning drum kit was like a copy of a copy. But years later, I found out about Tommy Lee doing it. Yeah. But back in the early days, we were like, why don't we just see if my dad and I built this contraption to mount a drum set on. So we had one song in our set where I would hop on this thing and do this spinning drum kit thing. And the main reason that we built it was to get to bring attention to the band, because the local newspapers would take pictures and write little articles about us, just the local central Pennsylvania, the local fish wrapper or Pennsylvania musician, like all these little newspaper magazines. So we got to get on the cover of all these magazines because we had this spinning drum set. So it kind of became a little bit of a gag in our show. Yeah. No, it was manual. Actually, my mom used to spin it, so I had to make sure that I didn't make her mad during the day. No, it was a frame that was hooked up to a wheel axle. Just some car that was on our property that was dead, just sitting there for years. And we took it apart and we mounted the frame on this wheel axle. And we just kind of got lucky that it was balanced perfectly, that you could spin it really easily. So that's how it started. And until years later when I started getting taller, because keep in mind, I'm like 10, 11 years old. And as I'm getting older, I'm getting taller, and my head's getting dangerously close to the ground as we spin around. So we had to retire it eventually, One year, my parents got me this really amazing drum set for Christmas. It was a Tama Art Star from the 80s. It was a Canadian maple kit. and it was 2 bass drums and a lot of toms and everything. And I think that their whole thing was like, well, we know that RJ is very extreme, and if we just get him a regular drum set, he's gonna want like a lot of drums, So at the time, my parents were raising me on a lot of classic rock music. So like my 3 main influences, even to this day, are John Bonham, Keith Moon, and Ginger Baker. Were like 3 of my favorites growing up. So my parents got me this crazy Keith Moon double bass, like Ginger Baker style drum set, because that was what they were raising me on. So that was really fun for years. But as I got older, I kind of started realizing that less is more, So I started stripping things away. I went down to a single bass drum. I think when I was younger, I was really into like Keith Moon and Ginger Baker, and as I was getting older, I started appreciating John Bonham more and listening to more Led Zeppelin. And so I decided to kind of mimic his setup. I did the single bass drum, single rack tom, 2 floor toms. For many years I did that. I remember seeing when I was younger, like old videos of Lars Ulrich and just being like, that's my drum set. Oh, cool. Except he had the black. It was the same thing. I think it was a Tama Artstar, like from the 80s, except he had the black hardware. He like took it a step up. I didn't have that. So yeah. No, my mom actually never played any musical instruments, although I think that she's a good singer, but she'll never admit it, She would sing in the shower, but or when we're driving in the car, she'd sing along to the radio, but my mom was a big influence on my musical taste. I think as I got older, I think when I was younger, I was really into like classic rock, Black Sabbath, The Who, Cream, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, anything with a color, Pink Floyd, Deep, and I still love all that to this day. But my mom was into like Prince and Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder and like all the more pop songs, So I think that my dad was a big influence on me growing up, wanting to be a musician. But my mom was a big influence on me growing up, wanting to be a songwriter. Because she would expose me to a lot of pop music. And in pop music, it's all about the songwriting. There's no riffs, there's no crazy drum parts. It's just about the groove and about the melodies and lyrics, So I'm really kind of grateful that both my parents kind of had very, very different styles that they liked. Although they did meet in the middle, like they both loved like Van Halen, Panama by Van Halen was their wedding song. So go figure. That explains a lot about my parents. But no, I think I had a really good, well-rounded musical absorption of music when I was younger. As you know, playing drums in the studio is really different than live. In a live setting, you're putting on a show, you're feeding off the energy. In a studio, it's a controlled setting. You're kind of playing under a microscope. Every hit has to be perfect. You're concentrating. You're trying to play all the parts correctly, which makes sense when you're trying to make a perfect recording. But what I loved about Nick and also working with him, and I think another part of it was going in the studio, we had a lot more experience. Every time we go into the studio, we gain more experience of how to record in a studio. First 3 albums, we were just really trying to focus on making the recording perfect, playing all the parts perfectly. But Nick, the difference between Nick and all the other producers we worked with was that he was a really big fan of the band, and he came out to a lot of shows. He would fly to see us live, and he told us every time we hung out with him, we're like, you guys, I love all the albums that you've made, but you still have yet to capture your live energy on a recording. I want to do that with you guys, And of course, him being a fan of ours and us also being a mutual fan of his, because his track record is amazing. And as a drummer, if you look at the bands he worked with Dave Grohl, he worked with Taylor Hawkins, Will Hunt with Evanescence, Braun with Mastodon, Neil Peart, you know, with the last 2 Rush records, Sean Kinney with Alice in Chains. Like, the records that he put out were amazing, you know, and we were big fans of him as a producer. He is kind of a rock star producer, but you would never guess it. Every time we hung out, he's just a goofy dude like us, you know. But he was like, no, I want you to get creative. Like, I want you to play like you play live, you know. And we recorded while I was tracking drums. It was with the 4 of us in the same room. So he wanted us to rock out like we do live and do all the crazy. He's like, if you want to stand up, you want to throw it. He loves to conduct with a drumstick. Like, he's such a great collaborator. He would give me ideas of what to play. I would throw out a bunch of crazy ideas, and he would coach me through them with a drumstick, like a conductor's one. And like, if a big part came up, he'd be like, "Come on, let's go!" And it's just like, "Yeah," you know. So if you sold the drum tracks, you'll probably hear a lot of yelling and like you don't hear them on the recording, but if you listen to just the drum tracks, you can hear like there's a lot of energy. And I think because of that, and along with that, very minimal editing, no sample stacking, and one of the biggest recording secrets is miking the toms on the inside. We took the bottom heads out and we mic'd them like concert toms, which made the toms stand out, and also it would help isolate the tom mics so there's not a lot of bleed. I think all those elements at once, I think, is why this record is probably the closest thing we've come to capturing the live energy on a recording. Oh my God, this is the best idea ever! So a couple times, it's a funny story, because in the drum solo, we always end with the big sticks, and it's kind of become a gag. It kind of happened by accident. A friend of mine gifted them to me. They were from this restaurant called Chuck E. Cheese, which is like a kid's restaurant. He was like, they're hanging on the wall. We're closing a franchise. They're just going to get thrown away. Can I bring them to the next show? Do you want them? I was like, sure. So he brought them to the next show. He's like, here you go. You can put these on your bedroom wall. They're kind of cool. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to play with them, you know? So we're just like, oh, this will be stupid, you know? And the crowd loved it. And they were like, oh, cool. So it kind of became a staple part of our show. Now we've tried to retire them, but if we don't do the big sticks, people get upset. They're like, where's the big sticks? I brought my kids to see the big sticks. So now the big sticks, we have to do them. We have to fly with them everywhere in the world, and we have to keep them. But a couple times, my drum tech would prank me by handing me a pair of chopsticks, you know, like chops for like eating. And I was like, make some noise for the little sticks, you know? So now we have some little drumsticks. So if you think that I'm not going to use these tonight, then you don't know me very well, because we are going to use these tonight and possibly for every show forever. So thank you so much, man. That's awesome. We'll use these for every show until we lose them. Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time, and thank you, Germany. We love you so much, and we're just so blown away that we get to come over here and that you guys like having us here. So you're such a wonderful country, wonderful people, and I don't want to leave. I think I might move out here. I love it.